Hey everyone, hope you're rocking. Filming this one today at my house. It's a day off, it's Sunday, so as you know, normally I film these in the studio. Now, today's conversation I think is really important. It's again one of my pet peeves, and it's an extension on some of the other things I've talked about in the other videos associated to this series. Now, what I notice is a lot of times is there is a massive misconception in the world of martial arts, especially even modern martial arts, between the difference between reality and, if we can call it, not necessarily fantasy, but just not really understanding the divide between training and actually then applying what you've trained against a resisting opponent. Because here's my philosophy. When it comes to martial arts, it's pretty simple for me. If you can't pull it off against a resisting opponent, not just once, multiple times, and then at the same time, not just the same opponent, but multiple opponents, in my view, it's a waste of time. I don't understand why anybody would want to spend any amount of time training anything that will not work under fire, under pressure, against a resisting opponent. So here's an interesting kind of paradox within the martial arts world. And what made me think about this was something that I viewed this week. I was on YouTube, I was looking around at different things, and I came across a very well-known female MMA athlete. And she had a training reel. So it was about 20 minutes long. It was all different aspects of her training leading up to a particular fight that she was getting ready for. And, when I watched the video, it was really, really impressive, right? So great technique, super fast, explosive, good strength in the movements, and so forth. So if I looked just purely at that, and I looked only at the training reel, and I used that as my benchmark for what the outcome was going to be in this fight she was getting ready for, then I would have assumed that she was going to do amazing. Because just based on how she was moving and training was phenomenal. However, and here's the interesting thing. So then I watched the fight that she was getting ready for, that she, in this training reel, this 20-minute training reel where she put all these different clips together, and 99% of what she was able to do in the training reel, she couldn't bring to bear in the actual fight. So this to me is an interesting phenomena, is that even people that are training for the realistic event, right? So for the ultimate, challenge of going up against a resisting opponent, themselves oftentimes don't understand where the disconnect is between their training and actually applying it in a live environment. So there's, we could ask the question, why is this? Well, again, if you go look on YouTube, you'll see all these people demonstrating stuff, right? All these self-proclaimed self-defense, reality-based self-defense guys and, martial arts people. And you watch them demonstrating stuff and they look, super fast and explosive and bam, 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 and it looks really amazing, right? On paper. Always, which is often the case in these kind of scenarios, first off, the other person's not fighting back, or the other person's feeding a specific energy that the person that's doing it against knows exactly what that energy is. So for example, if I pick up the focus mitts and I tell you to do a certain sequence, you know what that sequence is, okay? If I can repeat that sequence enough times, what's going to happen is you're going to get really good at that sequence, and of course, it's going to look amazing when I do it, right? So if I'm holding the focus mitts and I go, okay, throw, jab, cross, fire, jab out, and you have to slip and then come back, pop, 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 the typical thing that you see looks fantastic. Then that person steps into the reality of the fight, so to speak, and can't do any of it. Because, first of all, there's two things there. There's a misunderstanding on why you would do drills like that, and I've talked about this, and one of the reasons why you do drills like combinations is not per se for the combination, but more so to just make those movements, that ability to move from one line to the next, second nature. Okay? But second to that is, like it or not, that kind of drill, for the most part, you already know what it's going to be. And in a fight, you have no idea. You don't know if this person's going to jab, or they're going to throw the cross, or they're going to fire a round kick at you, or they're going to shoot to take you down. You're not going to know that. Of course, when you're drilling, you're trying to preempt all these kind of situations from happening on you. So you're drilling the counters and so forth. Okay, but a lot of times when people do these drills, this is the crux of the matter. When they do these drills, they do it against either a situation that's been set up so they know what's going to happen, or the person doing it to them is being compliant for the most part. The best example of this is where somebody will demonstrate on YouTube that what they're going to show you now will enable you to defend yourself against an attacker. Right? And then they have the attacker come out, the attacker throws the first shot, the person who's doing the defense does a block or whatever that may be, does his counter strike, right? So he puts in his offense. But if you look very carefully, the other person only threw the first shot and didn't fight back. Okay, so this is where the issue comes in, is that the minute somebody fights back, that changes the dynamics of your response. Your ability to respond now isn't going to be predicated on how many drills you did, but rather how much training did you do against uncooperative resisting opponents. So I think drills, right, are of value, like focus mitt drills and stuff, are of value, especially in the beginning for a new person coming in who has never thrown a punch before, have never done a knee, never done a kick. I think it's fantastic, right? Because there you learn the techniques, you learn to fix things if it's incorrect, and you moving you start developing what I call movement fluency, right? Your ability to move from one angle to the next. However, that has a very limited shelf life in what it's actually going to do for your game. If you really want to take your game to the next level, there is only one way to do it. And the only way to do it is against a resisting opponent, right? An uncooperative opponent in sparring. Now, I'm not saying for a second that every time you spar, you need to go balls to the wall and go full out. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying rather take what you want to train that you would have done on focus mitts, pull it out of that drill kind of environment and put it and place it and situate it in an actual environment where there's resistance. Now, that resistance doesn't have to be 100% or resistance that if you messed up and you made a mistake, you get seriously hammered or knocked out for doing it. No, but there needs to be resistance. That resistance can be up to you in what you feel you can personally handle. So if I can only, do the specific thing that I want to work on at 20% is the level that I can do it and still achieve some measure of success, maybe not all the time, but a lot of the times, that's a good place to start, right? Then next week you dial it up to 30%, and a few weeks down the road you're at 50%, and eventually you will be able to do these things at full throttle. And so this is the interesting thing for me, is that at full throttle, right, at the ultimate kind of expression of the game, right, be it, in a fight, in competition, right, so where you're trying to knock me out and I'm trying to knock you out, or I'm out on the street and I have to defend myself and I have to do whatever I need to do to survive, and if I don't do the right things, I'm going to get hammered for doing it, right, I'm going to get hurt. In those ultimate expressions, a lot of what you see on YouTube, I would argue 99.9% of the times, is not going to come out. So to go back to this particular lady that I saw, she had fantastic techniques, and the techniques that she was training are highly functional techniques, right? So they weren't even kind of fancy things really for the most part. I mean, we're talking jabs, crosses, hooks, good knee, a good round kick and so forth. But almost her entire training reel that I remember, and I don't remember anything else in there other than the fact of her training in a drill-like fashion, all right, where it's against a heavy bag, so you know where the bag is, plus the bag's not firing back, so you don't have that resistance and that internal stuff to deal with. Or it was with a pad holder where you knew kind of what the pad holder was feeding you, right? It was almost prearranged, so to speak. All of these drills are great, but there's one glaring problem there. And the problem is There is no real functionality beyond just the immediate example of the technique, because at the end of the day, you still have to apply that against a resisting opponent, somebody who's going to try to take your head off. This is the number one thing that needs to be reminded here over and over again. And when that happens, not only are you now going to have to pull those techniques off, you also have to deal with the internal stuff that's going on inside, your internal dynamics, right? Your inner kind of opponent that comes up is now an issue in that thing, and nobody's going to get that from working a drill, right? The only time that you can interact with your inner opponent is when you're actually on the mat and doing it against a resisting opponent who, for the most part, is not necessarily going to be telling you what they're going to be doing. Now, you might isolate parts of the game, right? So you might say, okay, I'm going to be working my strikes and I want you only to take me down. Now, when you take me down, you can do any kind of takedowns you want. I'm not going to prescribe to you what takedowns to do. You can come in with any takedown you like. That's a much better way of training to defend takedowns, okay, than going in and drilling it, where I'm firing on the focus mitts and then the guy does a takedown. And then I'm firing on the focus mitts and the guy does a takedown. That's okay in the beginning when I first want to just learn the technique, but as soon as I can, I want to jump past that and go into a more resisting realm. This reminds me of an experience that I had when I was a young, before I was 20, and I was boxing consistently every single day. And I remember this vividly, where two guys came into the boxing gym and they were warming up, and I've never seen them before. And my coach turned to me and said, "Hey, Rodney, listen, once these guys have warmed up, you got to spar them." And they were on the bag, and they were on the top and bottom ball and on the pier ball, and they looked amazing. I mean, their technique looked amazing. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm checking these guys out in the corner of my eye, and I'm going, holy crap, today's the day I'm going to get my ass handed to me, right? These guys look phenomenal. What's the bottom line of the story? I knocked them both out in the second round. Why? Because they've been drilling, sure, so they can do fantastic movements on drills, like against a bag that's not resisting back. On a top and bottom ball, that's not really giving resistance back, right? Now suddenly they're in front of a real opponent who is trying their best to knock them out, okay? And now they not only have to pull that stuff off against a resisting opponent that's moving, right? Timing changes, okay? They don't know what I'm going to do next. And they have to deal with their own inner opponent that keeps coming up. So here's the reality of the thing. You need to be more discerning. People need to be more fucking discerning. It drives me up the wall that people latch onto this fancy shit that they see and it looks all explosive and whatever, but then they really believe that that's how a fight's going to be. That tells me that you've never been in a fight. You don't actually understand what a fight is if you are impressed by that, okay? So here's the bottom line of my discussion. If what you're watching, that person, all right, that you see that person doing it, they then cannot apply it in the reality of the fight against a resisting opponent, against an uncooperative opponent. For the most part, throw it out the window. You know, if it's not working against a resisting opponent, then it shouldn't even hit on your radar. It shouldn't even matter, okay? There's a ton of martial arts styles out there. You can go on YouTube and you can watch martial arts styles from all over the world. This common theme comes up over and over and over again. You'll see them demonstrating stuff. The other guy doesn't fight back. There's no real resistance. That's great. Stop showing me that stuff is my attitude. Show me how you do it against a real uncooperative opponent who's trying to take your head off. If you can show me that you can pull that off there, then I'm going to listen, because then there's something of value there. This is one of the reasons why when you look at combat sports, for the most part, you see the same techniques over and over and over again. Now, granted, some people can deliver them at a much higher level than others, but watch 20 MMA matches. Tell me in any 20 of the MMA matches that you watch that you don't see a jab, that you don't see a cross, that you don't see a knee, that you don't see a low round kick, right? Pretty much every single time you see the same things, that you don't see somebody doing a takedown and either going for a high single or a double leg, you know, for example. You see the same things over and over. Obviously, every now and again, something comes out that is not a common denominator, but for the most part, you see the same common techniques over and over. There's a freaking reason for that. And the reason is because that stuff works under fire. However, only if you have practiced those foundational, quote unquote, common functional techniques against resisting opponents, right? So almost always the combat athlete that does more of that through sparring tends to do a whole lot better in a fight than somebody who spends all their time on equipment like a heavy bag, top and bottom ball, or hitting pads, right? Like I said before, I'm not against that. I think that's good to have in your game, and it's good to train that stuff, especially if you're trying to fix certain parts of your techniques and you're learning something new. Great. But the quicker you can move away from that, the better. So next time, please do me a favor. Next time you're watching YouTube and you see somebody come out and they're doing all this fancy blitz fast stuff, you know, it looks really cool, trap the hand, do all this kind of stuff. Look at what the other person is doing. Notice that the other person's not fighting back. Question that immediately and say, okay, I want to see somebody do that just once, okay, against a resisting opponent. Maybe not just even one resisting opponent. Better if they can do it against multiple opponents. This is what I value in Crazy Monkey Defense. Like I've said before in a previous video, I can teach anything. I can teach tons of stuff, but I chose not to do that. Whatever I teach, I know is battle tested. I've tested it in either tens of thousands of hours on the mat in sparring, or I've tested it out on the street in tons of street situations, right? If you know anything about me, I spent several years outside some of Johannesburg's roughest nightclubs. I ran a really big dormant bouncing group with over 70 bouncers. I've got there, you know, been there and got the t-shirt, so to speak. I know what it is to be out on the street and fight versus one person, multiple people, somebody with weapons, and so forth and so forth and so forth, right? So I've been there, I've done it, I've got the t-shirt. At the end of the day, I'm only going to teach stuff that I can pull off myself against a resisting opponent. Everything that I come up with in Crazy Monkey Defense, everything is always built off resistance, right? Yes, sometimes we drill it like we said because you want to teach somebody how to do this, especially when they're learning something new, but you will never, ever, ever see me do anything in drills that I cannot do myself in a live environment against a resisting opponent. Remember, this is my basic philosophy. If you cannot do it against resistance, it's irrelevant. I don't care what you want to tell me about stuff. Don't tell me about people doing X, Y, and Z. Show me them doing it against a resisting opponent. In actual fact, if you did your homework and you went and tried to find somebody doing that, you'll see most of the time they can't pull it off. Or if they are able to pull it off, it's never the way that they said it's going to be. Because fights are chaotic, right? They never go exactly as you would like to. They never go to plan. And you always end up having an approximation of what you've trained. Never exactly as you've trained it, right? Perfection in a fight is an illusion. It doesn't exist. So if I'm watching somebody demonstrate something and they say that this will enable you to defend yourself, but it looks perfect, there in itself is already a warning sign. There's already a problem there if you see that. Because if it's too perfect, then it's not real.